What is up? Today we're going to be talking about the number one training method that you can implement instantly to start to bridge the gap between your strength into power and more explosiveness on the field. And it's a method that we use inside of all of our programs to help transition our athletes, typically in our second phase with it, which I'm going to break down why. My name is Coach Nick Lyden, Certified Strength and Conditioning Coach and Athlete Academy co-owner. So let's dive into it. So when we're talking about bridging the gap between strength and power, we first need to know the difference between what is strength and what is power, right? Because a lot of people will assume that just being really strong means you're really powerful. And for most people that can seem like, yeah, that makes sense. But when we're talking about power in terms of athletic performance, it is completely different. Power in the gym is not power on the field. Power on the field has a much higher velocity component to it with your ability to react and your ability to be explosive at a moment's notice with it. So when we're talking about strength, I want you to think of strength as max force, right? So your 1 rep or 2 rep max back squat where you're lifting as heavy as weight as you possibly can and you're just trying to get it up. You're trying to recruit the most amount of muscle fibers to produce the most amount of force that you can in that movement. That is true strength. Because the speed doesn't matter, right? How fast you go up doesn't matter with that. It's purely about the weight the force that you can produce. Now within that, right, some other factors that are involved in being very, very strong is having a very good central nervous system drive, your ability to recruit a lot of muscles to be able to produce that force, right? There's also a big component on skill and technique. This is why weightlifters practice the same movements over and over and over and over, because they are perfecting the skill and leverage in order to perform that movement. Whereas on the field, we don't always, yes, we practice technique, but it's a chaotic environment. We're always having to change our bodies and react to different stimuluses. So we're not necessarily perfecting the skill quite to that level where it's like, say, a deadlift where everything's locked in and you're doing it to perfect that movement, because that's going to the skill there is going to provide greater efficiency to perform that movement in the gym, right? There's also muscular coordination, right? How your muscles are firing and how they sequence with one another to produce the most amount of force. And another thing that really depends and can help with your strength is purely genetic is your tendon insertion. So all that really is say your bicep attaches a little bit further from your arm right here. The bicep is going to pull. It has a greater leverage point to make it easier to actually pull that arm up versus if you're someone who has it a little bit closer, it's going to be a little bit harder simply from mechanics that the arm is going to be at a disadvantaged state compared to someone who has a little bit more of an advantage state in terms of the leverage. Now, when we talk about power is force times velocity. And it's this velocity component that gets overlooked so much, right? So say we have someone who can squat 500 pounds and they do it at 1 meter a second, meaning that they're coming up, 1 meter a second is actually pretty fast. But say they're coming up and they get up a meter in 1 second, and that's 5 times 500, right? That would equate to 500 pounds of power. Versus if you have someone who can lift 315 pounds at 2 meters a second, right? It's less weight, but when you add that velocity component, which is 2 meters a second, which is double that 315 times the 2 meters a second is going to give you a larger number than 500, right? This is going to be 630. So this actually would be the more powerful athlete. And this is a simple example using, say, a back squat for it, but it doesn't quite work like that on the field. Now, when it comes to power, right, there's a spectrum of power that we need to work through in order to maximize all the different components, but it's largely developed and utilized through our central nervous system, and it's the efficiency which we use our central nervous system and the drive, which is similar to our strength over here. Now, one thing that we really need to focus on with our power is that rate of force development. So it's how quickly can that central nervous signal get down to our muscles to maximally recruit all the muscles to get max force, speed, power, all working in the same area or same movement that we want in order to create that power. And it's largely there's a big component on muscular coordination. So when we're talking about power, think of like a fighter throwing a punch, right? It's not just how strong you are in your chest and say your delt and maybe your tricep with your arm to throw a punch. It starts at the feet, right? They push off their feet, they turn, they rotate, it's into the hips, into the core, and it's transferring out their arms. So we need to sequence and coordinate that pattern all in one motion to get a summation of force, right? So adding, 5 to get a 30 pounds versus just like 15 right here, right? It's all got to add together with it. And if our kinetic links and our chains aren't working systematically, right? Say like our hips turn and then our foot goes and then our arm goes and then we start, you're not going to be adding as much force as possible. So with this, that's how the movement coordination or the muscular coordination is important when it comes to power. And in terms of mobility, most people think of mobility as just like doing these little stretches or like feel good stuff, right? But if we think about mobility and think about it in terms of sprinting, right? If I'm an athlete and I can't raise my leg up, because mobility is range of motion under tension, okay? It's not just stretching. And the tension that's created is the gravity of like actually lifting up that leg, right? If I can't lift my leg up high enough when I'm running, I'm only gonna have this much space to produce force when I put my foot into the ground, okay? Versus someone who could lift their foot up and get their leg up this high, they have more time to put that force down into the ground to produce more power. It's a simple way to think about mobility and how it influences your power overall as an athlete. Now, we've purely been talking about muscle, power, and strength right now. But one thing that happens with power and producing power that is a huge component of it, and this is all the elite athletes and people who can jump through the roof, they have a huge amount of energy and power that they can get through and from their tendons, right? So that's what's known as your elastic strength and stiffness. It's your stretch shortening cycle that we've talked about previously, that really start to add to that overall power. So think it's the muscle-driven power plus the free kind of energy and power that you get from the tendons that really enhance the power overall and add to the velocity of that. And typically with power, you are going to be more dominant, and you need to be more dominant with fast twitch muscle fibers, whereas strength, yes, you're still going to have those fast twitch muscle fibers, but it's not going to be to the same degree and same quantity as someone who's a true power athlete, like a 100-meter sprinter. They're going to have a higher amount of fast twitch muscle fibers, say, compared to a strong man over here. Now, how do we start to like take the strength that we had and really start to put it into that power? Well, I do want to say that most athletes need to get strong first, but when you've gotten strong enough to a point, your returns, right? And when you first start lifting, you first start getting strong, like you're like, oh dang, I can jump higher, I can run faster, these different things. And that's simply due to your ability to create more force with each step or within your jump. But as you start to get older and older, right, as you get more experienced and you're starting to go up into the next level, you need to have the velocity component in there in order to actually maximize it, because this is going to go up, but if this stays the same or actually decreases, which can happen with certain types of training, if you're doing strength training, bodybuilding, because you're not working the velocity component, you could be super strong, but actually slow. This is a problem that happened to me. I fell into this, and when I started to add in more power-based training and started adding in the type of training that I'm going to share with you here shortly, everything started to change. I actually got stronger. I started getting faster. I could jump higher, all because I started working on the other end of the spectrum of the velocity, force velocity curve, which helped with my overall power levels. And that method that we're going to share with you is called the contrast training method. This is an easy, simple method that you can use to start to train and bridge the gap between strength and power to become a more explosive athlete. And it's a great way to slowly start to add in those plyometrics to develop, to have some graded tolerance, so you're not just going into thousands and thousands of plyometrics. It limits it a little bit, but it allows you to get that exposure and it allows you to get that development that we're looking for. Now, with the contrast training method, we are working on large compound movements paired with a plyometric movement that is going to, what that is going to do, right? It's like a superset. what that's going to do is it's going to achieve something known as post-activation potentiation. So all this means is that with a heavy load, right, focusing on strength, we're going to prime our central nervous system. We're going to prime our body. We're going to like almost trick it into thinking like, hey, I need to produce like a lot of force with that movement because you just did it. And then your body's gonna think, I still need to produce that same amount of force because it hasn't really fully realized what's going on. And then you go into a more velocity plyometric movement. So this force is increased, but now this velocity is increased, and you'll have better performance with it, right? So you can try this yourself. You know, you can do, say, a broad jump, a standing broad jump just by yourself. You haven't done anything yet. Do a broad jump. Rest a little bit, 2-3 minutes. Then I want you to go hit 1 or 2 heavy trap bar jumps or trap bar deadlifts. Coming up, rest 15-30 seconds, feel good, and then go jump again. You're gonna have a greater performance. You're gonna have a greater distance that you've achieved because you primed your nervous system, you primed your body to express more power. And this is one way that we start to teach our athletes how to transfer that power into more and more explosiveness that you are going to be able to get and actually be able to use on the field. So all it is, like I mentioned, is that you are pairing a heavy compound movement like a squat with its complementary plyometric. We want to keep the volume low because I see people mess this up all the time where they're like, oh, I'm doing contrast training, and then they'll do sets of 8, 9, 10 reps, and then their muscles are fatigued. And when your muscles are fatigued, you can't produce the most amount of power, right? You fatigue the system, and then you try to go into power training, and then you have worse performance. And if you're not hitting a certain threshold of performance or distance or speed with your power work, you're not going to give your body the stimulus that it needs in order to make those adaptations or get the results that you want. But this is a way, contrast training is a way that we do this inside of all of our programs, inside of our bomb squad program for our rotational athletes. We actually use it a little bit in speed training with some resisted sprints and non-resisted sprints using specific velocity decrements and things like that, as well as in our strength and power program for all of our athletes who are really starting to take that strength and move it into power. And there's another phase in there where we really work on like peaking power, peaking explosiveness, and becoming the best athlete you actually could be. And if you're interested in learning more about that, click the link below. You'll see all 3 programs in there. It's inside of our Elite Athlete Project membership. And you can join us where we'll be able to help coach you through and do things for you in order to make you the best athlete you can be. So click the link below, and I'll see you on the inside.